Okay, you can tell I'm rocking a pair of 3D glasses, so therefore I decided to go see Thor in 3D. Now, there's not a ton of 3D. A lot of it is done with kind of like the foreground, midground, background sort of work. It is impressive when they go to Asgard, and especially when he fights like the Frost Giants and bits and pieces here and there, like when he's traversing the Rainbow Bridge or being transported from Asgard to Midgard. Midgard, of course, being Earth. Beyond that, I mean, it cost $3 more for me to see it in 3D, and I don't think it added $3 worth of value to the movie. That having been said, I thought this one overall was pretty good. Some people were saying this is going to be like the Lord of the Rings of comic book movies, and it's not really like that. It begins with the scenes we've seen from the trailers, where it is Thor kind of being hit by Natalie Portman's vehicle. Actually, it's being driven by Kat Denning at the time, but she blames her since they're trying to drive their way around a storm. And then who are you? That's then when they go to a very truncated version of Thor's background story. It's Odin telling them about the battle with the Frost Giants and taking the casket. And then both Thor and Loki standing there as boys, and then them as men. When on like Thor's big day, he's saying essentially ends up being the oath. Do you swear to do all these different things? And then all of a sudden they get attacked by Frost Giants and essentially the royal armory. There's an eye that's in the foreground. I couldn't tell if it was Odin's eye or the eye of Agamotto. And there's also someone mentioned that there's supposed to be the Infinity Gauntlet. I could not see it. It might have been somewhere in the background. The Frost Giants slay the guards, and then the Destroyer takes care of them. The Destroyer, of course, is behind a wall and looks kind of like, I'll say, looks kind of like Ultron. Essentially, he's looking at a giant robot that fires a destructive beam from its eyes. Yeah, kind of like the day the Earth stood still. Somewhat. And it eradicates those guys. Just then they go down there and Thor's like, this is an act of war, we should go after them. Odin's like, they came down here and paid with their lives, they died. There's no reason to go after them, there's just no reason to. And then, as Odin kind of walks away, Loki kind of goads Thor a little bit like, no, I do definitely agree with what you're saying. They need to go out there and be taught a lesson. So Thor, Loki, the Warriors 3, and Sif make their way essentially to the realm of the Frost Giants. And moral Thor's like, why did you attack our kingdom? And he was like, oh, there are traitors in the house of Odin. Giant fight erupts. And the leader of the Frost Giants lets loose this giant beast, which Thor kind of blows a hole through as he flies through its mouth out the back of its head. And as it's surrounded by an army of Frost Giants, that's when Odin shows up and he's like, listen, is there any sort of, okay, let's just go back to our truce. I'll punish Thor for what he's done. There's no reason to have a war. The Frost Giant's like, oh no. No, he came here, he killed my people, you now have open war against Asgard. That's what leads to Thor being banished. And then once that's done, then it goes right back to where they left up in the beginning, where Thor got hit by a truck. They take him to the hospital, where Thor, of course, has no idea what's going on, so he fights his way past people in the hospital, then gets hit again. Again by Natalie Portman. She's trying to figure out who he is, exactly what happened with the weird storm that he came through. Gives him the clothes of her ex-boyfriend, Donald Blake. Yes, there's reference to Donald Blake. They find out that where the hammer's at, and of course, they kind of throw like a barbecue around it. So people are having an awesome time, and there's your Stan Lee cameo. Shield shows up, builds their compound around it. Thor breaks his way into it, cannot lift the hammer. Of course, the one caveat is a person who was actually, there when this happens. Thor fights somebody who is pretty good. We don't know if it's Captain America or Luke Cage, because they don't really show him. There's a guy in a basket who's wielding a bow and arrow, referred to as Clint. If you've seen any other things, that's who Hawkeye is in the Avengers movie. They release Thor after Loki comes down and tells him, here's what happened. And then now Loki has ascended to the throne. You're probably thinking, okay, so far sounds pretty good. Which then leads to Thor fighting the Destroyer, Thor being proven worthy. Actually, Thor and the Warriors 3 and Sif fighting the Destroyer. Thor being proven worthy. And then going back to his final confrontation with Loki. Now, the weird thing is, this movie being, when I saw it, it was about 2 hours long. Your action sequences, there's a little bit less in the way of action scenes. We have the initial battle with the Frost Giants, and then you kind of have Thor in human form fighting in the hospital, Thor in human form fighting his way through S.H.I.E.L.D., Thor in human and in Thor form fighting the Destroyer, and then Thor fighting Loki. All in all, this is a very solid movie. Do I think it was better than like the first Iron Man? Really not so much. The first Iron Man was absolutely fantastic. This is a very good summer. This is very entertaining, very enjoyable. The nice thing is, it wasn't as weighed down as Iron Man 2, where you had to throw in multiple characters and then give them some background. It's primarily Thor and Loki. With the Warriors 3 in there, and they do a good job with them, and Sif. Anthony Hopkins is a phenomenal Odin. And when it comes to other characters showing up, they make mention of Banner and of Stark. That's about it. So this one is predominantly focused on Thor. Just like Incredible Hulk was focused on Hulk, and the first Iron Man was focused entirely on Iron Man. So I think in a continuity, if you were to watch Iron Man 2, where after the credits ended with the hammer coming down, this one essentially takes place right after Iron Man 2. Now, is there a scene after the credits? Yes. That's it for the regular review. I'm actually going to describe the scene after the credits in... Okay. The other doctor who was with Natalie Portman is invited to essentially what looks like a prison for supervillains. Runs as Samuel L. Jackson. And that's a whole, you've done some really impressive work, Doctor. Yeah, we think we found a portal to another dimension, and that's a huge finding, isn't it? And he goes, well, there's what we hear about in myth and what we hear about in history. Sometimes you get a little bit of both. Opens the case, and there's the cosmic cube. They then show a reflection, and you see the Doctor, and you see Loki. Loki makes mention of, I'd like to have a look at that. And the Doctor goes, I'd like to have a look at that. Therefore implying that Loki, after being cast down from Asgard, has decided to essentially possess, or else to use another complicated illusion, the Doctor, so he's actually have access to the cosmic cube. If he's doing possessions, he'll probably try to possess the Hulk, and that'll probably be a giant plot point for the Avengers. Or he'll use the cosmic cube against the Avengers, and therefore, forcing all other people to work as one unit. And that is Thor.